Hi there. My name is Brian Holda, and a few things have been put on my heart to teach on regarding prayer. So I wanted to make a series of very short videos to show some of the things that I believe God has been speaking to me. And so whoever's able and willing and up for watching this, I want to speak it to you as well. So in this first teaching here, I wanted to talk about being successful in prayer. God defines success here. And there's two parables that Jesus talks about that are probably maybe the most popular, perhaps the only ones that I can think of that address prayer particularly. And the first one's found in Luke 11. I'll read that here. It's Luke 11, verses 5 through 8. And it says, "And he said to them, which of you shall have a friend, and go to him at midnight, and say to him, Friend, lend me 3 loaves, for a friend of mine has come to me on his journey, and I have nothing to set before him. And he will answer from within, and say, Do not trouble me, the door is now shut, and my children are with me in bed, I cannot rise and give to you. I say to you, though he will not rise and give to him because he is his friend, yet because of his persistence, he will rise and give him as many as he needs." And I should mention, right before that parable, Jesus teaches on the Lord's Prayer. And right after that parable, he says, "So I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you." So clearly, he's talking about prayer here. In this particular parable in Luke 11, you have 3 main parties involved. One is there is a friend who comes back from a long journey, is understandably hungry. The second party is the friend whose house the journeyman comes into, and he says, "Please, I'm hungry, can you give me food?" And so this friend who he comes to has no food. And then you have the third party, the other person who actually has food but is asleep, has his kids there. The door is closed. I understand the feeling, having 3 kids myself. You're tired. And so the friend says, "I have no bread," but he knocks on the door, he keeps knocking, he keeps knocking, he keeps knocking, and finally, not because he's a good friend, but just because of his persistence, the one who had bread actually shared it with him. So there's 3 things I want to take note of in this parable, and then we'll go on to another parable. The first thing is that you have a poor man who is pleading. Number 2, a rich man, at least rich enough to have bread. And then number 3, you have pleading involved, in which brought the bread from the rich man into the poor man's house. So you have those 3 parts. Keep that in mind, and we'll go to Luke 18 now. The next parable is called the parable of the persistent widow in Luke 18, and it starts in verse 1. It says, "Then he spoke a parable to them that men ought always to pray and not lose heart." Again, it's very clear this parable is about prayer. "Saying, There was in a certain city a judge who did not fear God nor regard man. Now there was a widow in that city, and she came to him, saying, Get justice for me from my adversary. And he would not for a while. But afterward he said within himself, Though I do not fear God, nor do I regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. Then the Lord said, Hear what the unjust judge has said. And shall God not avenge his own elect who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth?" Perhaps you're seeing a theme. There's definitely a theme in this parable as well. You have here a widow, and he doesn't just say it's a woman praying or pleading with the judge, but it's a widow, and that's purposeful because a widow has no earthly help. If she was a wife, she could talk to her husband to help against this intruder, but she doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have someone on earth to help. So she pleads with the judge. So in this parable we have, again, 3 elements here. Number 1 is a widow. And then number 2, you have a powerful judge. And then number 3, you have, again, pleading. And so you can almost imagine in the widow's mind, she has had this adversary come against her over and over and over, and she's here now. She finally has a hearing with the judge, and the judge at first says, no, I don't want to do this. And she you can almost, to me, I picture, she's looking around, I have no help but you. You have to help me. And she just pleads, and she's going to claw, and she's going to scratch, she's going to be dragged away out of that courtroom before she stops, because she wants so badly to get an answer from this judge, because that's her only hope. And so, in both, though, you see these themes, that it starts, the person who is the prayer, and what Jesus is trying to teach, it has no means. They're either the poor man, or in Luke 18, it's a widow who doesn't have earthly help. They're both pleading with someone who does have means, either a rich man or a powerful judge. And the point in the parable is, this guy wasn't particularly happy to help him. This guy wasn't particularly happy to help her. But they still did because of their pleading. They pleaded like someone who was in need, knowing you have the need you have what I need. Please help me. You're my only source of help right now. And then of course, how much more Jesus says, how much more is God, who actually does want to help us and is not unjust, but is just, is helpful. How much more will God come to our defense in these matters? But I'm here to argue, and this is the whole point of this first teaching, is that if your prayer life sucks, frankly, and I've been there most of my Christian life, to be honest, a revelation of one of these 3 things has not happened. Either you don't understand how poor you are and how much you're in need of God. You think, oh, if God comes through, great, but if he doesn't, I have the resources in myself, I'm clever enough, whatever. That's the first revelation you need to see, is that you are a person in need. Read the Psalms. You can see why David prayed the way he did, because he knew his need. Number 2 revelation, God has what you need. He is the only source of what you need. So you're in need, God has what you need, and then the number 3 revelation you need is that somehow your pleading will bring the resources of God into your possession. That your pleading makes a difference. So those 3 things, you need a revelation of those 3 things. Your lack, God as the only source, and that your pleading can change your lack to becoming your gain through God. And just the last point is in Luke 1. This is Mary, Luke 1:53, and it just is a concise way to say exactly the same thing we've been saying here. Mary is singing this as she's praising God about the Messiah that will come in her. But she says this in verse 53. God has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. You see that there? 3 elements all coming here. First, it's the hungry who get things from God, not the rich. So how are you approaching God? Is someone hungry? Second, God has things to give. So in verse 53, he had good things to give. So we have a revelation, we're hungry, but God has the means. And number 3, it's kind of implied here that we have to come to God. In other places I've shown that what we saw already, that we come to God, and only by our coming to God in some matter, or in some way, then we can get God's resources into our hands. Another way to look at it, there's many ways, is we're like children and God is the parent. In 2 Corinthians it said it's not for the children to save up for their parents, but the parents to save up for their children. And so if your parent has all these resources and you're the child, well, what do my own children do? Daddy, I'm hungry. Okay, let me help. I got all sorts of things in the refrigerator, Sometimes I gotta say, well, wait a little bit. It's not mealtime. But a lot of times I'll say, I think I can help you with that. Same thing. You're hungry. Your dad has all the resources, but he's waiting for your voice, your pleading, to make the difference.